Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Retribes Stick Together. Today, I am joined by a guy who's become, well, geez, man, I've been in contact with over the last 8 years in some way or another. He's seen me in not a really good way, and then seen me in a different light. And I'm really happy that you could join us, Jason Wood, today for this episode of Stick Together. First of all, I just got to say, how are you doing? You're looking sharp as usual.
Thanks, mate. Well, thanks for having me. Much appreciated. Yeah, feeling good. Just did a workout and showered up and just ready to chat with you guys.
You're always the guy that makes sure that you look great. I've always been impressed by your style and your attention to detail. I imagine you're wearing some really nicely pressed pleated trousers right now.
Actually, no trousers at all, because this is a Zoom meeting, so you only have to dress from the top
up. Woody, I love you, buddy. I love you. You know the format of what we do. The first period is going to be talking about how you fell in love with the game. Second period is going to be about your pro career, mainly as a Cardiff Devils backstopper. And then the third period, we're going to get into all the juicy stuff of life after hockey and your role in the fire department and moving countries and all that good stuff. I'm really looking forward to this chat. I'm sure it'll probably bring a bit of an overtime session as well. So just like that, let's get at it. Drop the puck for the first period. And let's get at it. Woody, how does a kid from London end up, a big West Ham fan? I know you're a sports fan. How do you end up as a goalie in ice hockey?
Well, probably I was 10 years old. My dad was a very sporty person. He took us to every sport under the sun. We went speedway, we went obviously football, boxing, and hockey. And one day we were at Streatham ice rink watching the Redskins play. Jeff Smith was playing, Gary Bryan was playing, and a gentleman approached us, and me and my brother were standing there with my dad, and he asked my dad, "Can you kids skate?" And my dad was like confused, and he's like, "Why?" And he says, "Well, we're trying to recruit for the Pee Wee team, the Streatham Braves." So we got some information. Well, my dad got some information, and he asked me, "Would you be interested?" He had a pretty packed schedule with football, which I took very seriously. And I decided to take him up on the offer, and I took some figure skating lessons to try and get some skating in. I went to a couple of practices, met Graham Waghorn. He was out there for the first time as well. He could skate a lot better than me. I was a terrible skater at the time, so I ended up in goal. Obviously, you don't have to move very far. You don't have to do much. You just stand there, which is obviously not the case. We all know that. Started in goal with a pair of figure skates, a pair of cricket pads, a pair of shorts, a boxing glove for a blocker, and a baseball glove for a catching glove, and a player's stick. And I had a helmet and some elbow pads, and that was it, and a chest pad, and that was it. Obviously progressed.
Dude, I'm thinking about the Mighty Ducks right now.
I was probably in the same shape as him too, the goalie back then. So I mean, that was where I kind of started, and I kind of really took to it. I really enjoyed it, and progressed through the ranks. We had a super strong kids team back then. The Streatham were known for producing some really good hockey players back then. I remember facing 120 shots in a full season with them. And me and John Nocta, we let no goals in the whole season, but we would face 2 or 3 shots a game, which were more like icings. So, we had a very strong team. Practices were great, but games were boring as hell. but that was kind of where I began, and I had a lot of help from Jeff Smith and Gary Bryan. They would come out and they would coach the kids and help out. And that was my humble beginnings, really, in Streatham. And after about probably 2 years, I was kind of the starting goalie in the system, and went up through the ranks from Streatham Braves to Streatham Scorpions, and always tended to play up a couple of years because I had progressed pretty well. And I was also a goalie in football, so I mean, I definitely liked and a wicket keeper in cricket. So I mean, I don't know if you can sense there's some kind of craziness here, but you know me.
We often, well, we always talk about goalies in ice hockey. It's just having to be, I don't want to use the word crazy or strange or anything like that, but just a little bit different than the other guys on the team. And we can get a little bit into that. Actually, the other day I was talking to Paul Rushforth about Trevor Robbins, and that's why we were talking about goalies who can be a little bit quirky, because Trevor did have his little his little quirks.
Yeah, well, we all do, right?
Yeah.
Superstitions and stuff, right?
You know what? I was talking to Brian Bidsey a few weeks ago, and he talked about the Streatham as a factory. He was like, back in the day, it was like a factory, just producing good hockey players. I actually didn't know Graham Waghorn was from London. I just remember him, in Nottingham. I didn't know he was a London guy.
You're starting to stretch.
But what was it like then? Like, why was Streatham so good at, and the Collins brothers? I remember Nicky and Dolly. Like, these are guys who all came from that system. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah.
So
I think
what was it that was so good about it? What made it so special?
I think we had really good coaching, experienced coaching. Warren Rust's dad, John Rust, was our coach. And then we had Redskins players who come out and coach us all the time too. And they take Tony Goldstone, I remember, played a big part in coaching when I was playing for the Streatham Braves, the Pee-wees. And there was just a lot of invested people doing it for the love of the game. And helping us kids along the way. And then you would have kids like Jim Johnston, who was leaps and bounds above everyone else, and Warren Rust, and they would be going to Canada, which was a new thing back then, to hockey schools and stuff like that, right? But the system was so well managed by these volunteers that really put their time and effort into making things great for us and making us the kids team we were and how tight we were together. Everyone wanted to play for us, for Streatham, back then when we were kids. And then when you move up, I mean, when you went to playing for England and playing for Great Britain, you had people like Peter Johnson, absolute legend, like Jonker, Rolly Barris. There was all around the country, there was people volunteering their time and doing the same things for their clubs. And you could see it in the success of their junior teams and their Pee-wee teams because of the effort and work that they would put in. And yeah, I owe a lot to all those guys. They all played a big part. And I listened to some of Pete's podcast a little while ago there, and most of the names in Durham that he mentioned were people that I had worked with, either with the GB team as a kid or just the England team. So it was kind of nice. You're Brian Cooper. I mean, he was always a big help up there too. There was so many people who had a hand in so many of us adults now to put us to where we are nowadays,
Yeah, no, I mean, you hear these names all the time, and it was an unpaid position to be a father or a volunteer who was helping out, a team develop. And there's always these two in our generation. And I know I wasn't over here at that time, but that people speak about is what was going on up in Durham and what was going on in Streatham. And I can understand Durham, it's up north, and it's not London. London is London. And London is this city where, there's a few little ice rinks. You had one in Richmond, you had one in Streatham, Alexander Palace. I don't know when their pad, I think they only had in around 1990. I don't know what was there before. So it was really Streatham and Richmond and Sobel, the little mini ice pad in Islington that Jeff Smith, I believe, learned how to skate at. And you just don't think of London as being a place where hockey players are going to be developed, but yet there it was, this place that produced player after player after player. And when I talk to guys at this, in this first period, we often talk about they maybe they grew up in Canada and they talk about playing on a frozen lake or in a frozen rink in the backyard or frozen rinks in the backs of schools. And the talk is of playing, and just having fun and like just going outside in like minus 20-degree weather, having to be dragged in by your parents. Like this is just the culture in Canada. But how like in London when football is the biggest sport, what's the culture like? How do you guys play? Where was it? Were you just like the early memories of like, I know you guys were getting at it on the ice and the practices, but were there moments where you guys were just goofing around being kids and just learning to play and fall in love with the game?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was such a tight family. Like the parents were all involved, heavily involved, and it wasn't as crazy fanatical as you see parents nowadays, getting into fights with coaches and stuff. Everyone was involved, helping out, and off the ice, I mean, we had lots of fun too. Road trips were fun. Like everything was made fun. You didn't get to see any of the stresses behind it. It was you were playing because you wanted to play hockey. It was for the love of the game, right? Yeah, I mean, we'd goof around like crazy. To get into that group, it was so tight. It took a lot. You wouldn't just walk in as a new player and suddenly be accepted. I mean, it was such a tight family as we were kids growing up. I remember playing up in Scotland, actually. I can't remember if it was for Streatham or for England, but we were kids and we were staying in this huge hostel, and it was just like a real creepy looking hostel, right? Massive house thing. And we were bored, so we ended up playing football in the corridors and having races around the corridors with laundry carts. And we ended up like breaking windows, and then the fire department showed up because we'd crashed and set alarms off, and we're hiding in the bushes, watching them. The whole team is in the bushes outside this house, hiding, watching the fire department go in and do their thing, right? So, yeah, I mean, we had lots of fun. When the ice froze over at Wimbledon, I mean, it would be we'd all head out there and skate there for all day for as long as the ice would last. I mean, I stayed over at other players' houses, and it was like school friends, people you were around all the time because we played as much as we could, and when we weren't playing, we were watching the Redskins.
And with the Redskins, like they I know they had some amazing like Fred Perlini and Brett Kelleher and Darren Zinger. Like they had some great imports. Brad Gratton, I think, was there for a little while. Like they had some great hockey players. How involved are they and with regards to the development of you guys? And I suppose, like, yeah, who were your heroes? Who were the guys that you were looking up? Especially, was it hard for you being a goalie, knowing that most of the time it was? I know, like Charlie Colon was over in Slough, but you who were you looking up to? Who were your heroes? Being as
Well,
you didn't have
definitely.
hockey night in Canada.
No, I mean, we'd watch recorded Hockey Night in Canada. It was impossible to get it. Like, you wouldn't see any NHL at all. But it would have been obviously Jeff Smith has been a mentor, and just watching Jeff over the years, he's still an absolute legend. Like he does so much for other people, and if I could turn out to be half the man he is, I'd be well on my way. Gary Bryan too, he used to come out and help a lot too. I mean, those guys were definitely my heroes because I looked up to them, and Barry Spores, who doesn't play anymore and quit at a young age, but he was also someone that came out and helped, but he was a couple of years ahead of me. Yeah, those are more the guys. And NHL, I actually like Pele Lindbergh. I don't know if you remember that name.
I do, yeah. But tragic,
Yeah.
tragic story. But Philadelphia
Yeah.
Flyers. I used to pretend when I would go in goal. I was at the time we play a lot of like floor hockey at school, and I used to love playing in goal with a baseball mitt. And we'd have some just strap on like hockey pads, and they could slide
Yeah.
around on the wooden floors. And I used to pretend I was Pele Lindbergh, so like he was my
So
hero
you
too.
had so you had better equipment in your gym than I had on the ice.
Do you know the great thing was we used to play with this thing that I think of one of the PE teachers made was a piece of felt, like the size of a puck, and then two pieces of leather that was stitched on the felt, and we used that as a puck inside, and you could whip it as hard as you want. You can even get some swing on it and some curve, but you could ding yourself right in the middle of the forehead with it, and it wouldn't hurt.
Oh, for sure. I mean, just talking about playing hockey like that. I mean, we would get together when we weren't on the ice, and we'd play ball hockey for hours as well. And you'd always be like every kid that's played hockey, you'd always be in the seventh game of the Stanley Cup final, even though we
Oh
had
yeah.
no coverage of it and we knew very little about it, only what we heard and saw in magazines. We were still seventh game, like these British kids were seventh game Stanley Cup final from a sport that they never really got to watch. and didn't know a lot about. So it was ingrained in us as much as it was ingrained in you Canadians.
Woody, that we do this like for UK hockey players. We're putting this content out just for hockey players, and I think it's wonderful that you guys are giving your time, knowing that your audience is a lot smaller than if it heads out to the fans. But as you're talking, you're saying this, it's like literally from my heart. I know your generation. Like I grew up playing against these guys, and I gotta say, there's something special. There is something special about these guys who would fall in love with a game that was like literally, like you talk about the NHL was thousands of miles away. You might get some news in one of the magazines, the Hockey News Review or Power Play or something like that. But they were all great athletes, with great characters, kind of like well, I looked up to them, and they were funny, really like good characters.
Yeah.
And they could take the piss out of each other, and they could fight. No one was ever scared of dropping their mitts. And I really think that it's a generation. I don't know so much the young generation now. Like I get to be involved a little bit, or I was involved a little bit, but it was a generation of kids that grew up into adults and hockey players that I just think it's a special group of people, and you were part of that. And it's just something that, as a Canadian-born guy who spent most of my life in London, just what it would take to fall in love with the game in that city, I think it just took something really, really special. Does that resonate with you at all with regards to you and your character, and especially the guy who eventually they say, why don't you just stand in between those two goal pipes and the guys shoot frozen vulcanized rubber at your skull?
Yeah, I mean, it does resonate for sure. I mean, it was definitely going in goal. It wasn't my first idea, but it was the only way I was going to get on that team, was to be a backup goalie. And I knew I wanted to be a goalie when I took a slap shot on the Redskins. One of the Redskins guys came out and took a slapper at me, and he hit me in the leg, and I was like down on the ice because obviously I was wearing the worst equipment ever. And I jumped back up and wanted to keep going. So it was something that I took to and I really enjoyed. And I think if you're pushed into a sport constantly by your parents, then you're not going to like it. And my dad was always there for me. He was always taking me to practice, and that's what you need. You need someone to stand by you and take you and let you find your own way, until obviously you get to a standard where then you might need a bit of pushing. But got to let these kids grow to the game and find out if it's something they actually want to do. And that was what that group was mostly made up of. Lots of kids with amazing parents that really, were there for their kids and took them to all these things. And I can't imagine the financial burden on a lot of these parents. And, that was in an era when mortgage rates were like 20%. So people were struggling, right? I remember another story, actually. Sorry, I keep digressing onto stories. But the Brixton riots were going on, right? And of course, we're all tough, like 12-year-olds. So we're going to go down there and we're going to check it out, right? Like, it's just crazy. Like, I don't know if you remember that or heard about it, but it was like, it was pretty bad. So we're going down. We got our helmets on, we got our sticks in our hand, and we're walking down Streatham High Street as a team, right? And we're getting closer and closer, and it's getting noisier and noisier and noisier. And we finally get like reasonably close, and we're like, this isn't a good idea. But we turned around and came back. But it's like just little things like that. We did stupid stuff as a team, and we were always tight and close as a team, and that's what makes success in any sport. So
yeah, no, I think it was a real, from hearing your story and Pete's story and guys who grew up in those little kind of factories of developing players through parents' love and determination, and the getting up at these weird times, because ice hockey times in the UK they're not the most favorable times, when you get some ice, especially when people are competing for session skating and disco sessions. I know figures.
Well, another thing too, I mean, when we weren't playing, we were on every public skate, the whole team. We're out there skating and bombing around, and so whenever there was ice, regardless of whether it was a hockey with a stick or without, we were using the ice constantly. And
didn't Tony Blaze's dad, wasn't he one of the managers at Streatham Ice Rink for a while?
Tony
Blaze?
I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. I think his dad he's a hockey player, played for the other way.
Oh, okay. I'm 95 years old, remember, so it's a long time ago.
I think he's older than you, so I don't. How old, you are 52 now, aren't you? You're my age. I'm
52, yeah.
53.
Yeah. Well, I think we look
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
I don't think we too bad. I think inside of us is this kind of forever young play thing, like
Yeah.
I know that through like and I just can't, even though I grew up in Saskatchewan, you grew up in London, the love of hockey, for some reason it's this idea that I'm trying to talk to people about the difference between playing the game, right? And having to play a match, like or just going out and play. And then when all of a sudden things change when it turns into a match, because all of a sudden
Yeah.
the competition and it's win or lose. But it's like the playing of the game is where the love happens. The street hockey, the frozen Wimbledon, the goofing around where there's no refs, there's no parents watching. It's just guys having fun,
Yeah.
and so for you in that time, like when did it go from that like fun to okay, I'm a goalie here. I'm either going to be a backup goalie or a starting goalie. It's getting a little bit more serious. So when do you all of a sudden start now getting into the ranks of like, playing for the squads, for the teams, and your first jersey and your first start and all of those memories?
I remember actually my first game was playing against Nottingham Juniors, and if I was to say to you, and I didn't tell you I was a goalie, I was one shot, one goal. That's quite a good record, right? But yeah, I had one shot, let it in, and that was my first ever game. And I basically tried to make a save like a football goalie because I was playing football, my whole life. And then from there on, I was interested. I asked lots of questions. I remember going back on the bus and I talked to Tony Goldstone the whole time back, just talking about, hockey and that kind of stuff. And I was just very interested in every aspect of the game. And then I started to get a lot better. I took things more serious and, I started sharing the duties. We play half a game each. And, when we played tougher games, I would get the start. So I progressed, I think, probably from my football abilities in goal. I worked, the angles came quick and all that kind of stuff. So the game it's similar in some ways to a football goalie, but obviously, it's got a lot of differences too.
So. Well, funny enough, I was a football goalie, and I actually played quite a high level in Canada. My claim to fame is that Paul Pesci-Solito scored 6 goals against me when he was playing for Ontario and I was playing for Saskatchewan. So
yeah,
that was well, honestly, I wasn't that bad, but I do remember the idea, the difference that like I know because my dad was like, you could be a goalie in hockey, and I was like, no, I like skating and I like the aspect of it, but I do remember the comparison of the angles because the pitch is just the bigger version of the rink. And I remember talking to guys and how they would use the post at the other end. And then same thing in hockey, how goalies would they would never look back. They'd be looking up at the rink to see where they are because they could gauge where they were on the ice from the angles of the other net. And I just thought it was pretty cool that goalies are there's this thing about a goalie's head where he's thinking about where he is, and he's using aspects of the rink rather than having to look behind him. So it's about getting this goalie brain, and starting to think about, and as you say, you probably had a little bit of a head start because you were a goalkeeper in football. So I suppose that's it really, is when did you start looking at the mechanics? Because a goaltender position is so much about mechanics and movement, and there was the different styles. There was a stand up and a butterfly goalie back then. When did you start to develop your style?
Pretty quick. I mean, I was a early butterfly style. Back then we did skate saves. Back then it was stand on your feet, don't go down, don't anticipate anything, right? So you basically, if you saw the puck, you tried to make the save. If you didn't see the puck, you stayed on your feet. There was no, like a shot from the point, you're going for a skate save. That could get tipped off anyone, and it did. So the mechanics were always there, but I like to use the butterfly a lot. And that was what got me ahead much quicker, was I was using that very early. Skate saves I did do, but they weren't really, I mean, every now and then I still play hockey now, right? And every now and then I'll throw out a pad stack and guys are like, whoa, it's like a blast from the past. But I've gone through probably 5 different styles of playing goal over the years because how the game has changed. I'd love to have my equipment. I'd love to have my equipment now, how the equipment is, and just be dropped into the NHL in the 70s.
Yeah, it would be cool because you look at the stuff that guys like Grant Fuhr and Andy Moe were wearing, and Billy Smith, and even up through Ron Hextall and Patrick Waugh, they were wearing these things that were like they were like they weren't big at all.
I used to
But
crank my pads on so tight it would cut the circulation off. Like all my pads were like instead of having a 5-hole that was closed, I had a V on my pad like that because they were pulled so tight it just pulled them all in. And yeah, I mean, you wanted them to feel like part of your legs, my whole life. I mean, I remember having a used pair of pads, my first pair of pads after the cricket pads, and they were held together with duct tape and they get waterlogged and, they stank like mold. They were disgusting. And it's just like you tape pieces onto them that fell off after a practice, it was just vile.
we're ending the end of the first period. So how did you know that you were going to actually start making senior hockey? And how did that move go to you actually moving into the junior ranks and going, I'm going to try to make a career out of this?
Well, when I was about 14, I was playing with the Streatham Bruins, which was the second team to the Redskins. So I was playing with like Biddy and Neil Brown. They were the guys who were above me. Barry Spores was the goalie. You had, I think, Chris Leggett was up there. Like it was that kind of age group, and I was playing up like 2 or 3 age groups, and I think we went to Medway and we played, and I came on at and played that game, and Medway were like, it was their only team. They had Kevin McNaught and guys like that, and I think we only lost by 1, but I had the game of my life, and then they wanted to sign me, and I don't think I went that year. I think I went the next year. But I ended up getting sent as a 14-year-old to the Saskatoon Blades training camp. Kevin McNaught got me a tryout there, and it was the old arena. They didn't have the new arena yet. That just shows you, about, yeah. And I stayed in this place called Martinsville, and all the veterans took me out. I was supposed to be on curfew, and I was basically their puppet. I talked for them because they wanted my accent, and I was picking up girls for them, right? So, and I was super shy, but they would make me like talk to the girls, get their attention, and then they say this, say that, say alligator, and it was like, it was unbelievable. I remember a guy, Jack Bocas. He was a guy that was taking me around, right? This stocky kid. And and I did really well at the camp, and they wanted to keep me for the main camp and send me to their junior B team. I was 14, like I just went home, right? So that was when I realized that, I mean, everyone wants to go as far as they can. I was still going to play in the NHL, right? That was my goal, like every other kid, right? You don't aim low as a kid, right? You've played in the NHL your whole life as a child in your head, right? Game 7. So, I mean, I knew I wanted to go as far as I can, and that's what I pushed to try and do. I took it seriously. I came to a point, like my last game of playing competitive football, I played for Kent, which is like playing for British Columbia, if anyone out here is listening. We played against Arsenal on their training ground, and we won 2-0. But it was just getting so hard to balance the two, because every time there was a hockey game, I bailed on football, and I had to choose between the two, and I chose hockey.
What a way to end the first period. Woody, it's becoming a little bit of a tradition here. We ask guys what their intermission routines were. You're the first goalie on, so I'm looking for something special, man. What was your routine in the intermissions?
Well, to this day, I still dress my left side first.
Yeah.
That was always something I did. I always dressed my left side first. I was very quiet in the dressing room. I wasn't vocal because I was always the youngest on the team. I was always playing up. So I would sit quietly and think about the game. Very superstitious. To this day, I still put my water bottle on my blocker side. Now I talk a lot more in the dressing room because I've got lots more experience when I play. But I didn't really have much of a routine until I got older. If I'd had a good game, the game before, I would try and match that day's preparation identical. I'd eat the same. I'd try and same movements. I'd wear the same clothes to the rink. Like I'd try and match everything to be the same, to try and, repeat that. I try and talk to myself a lot in the net, because we are all crazy goalies. I say to myself, don't let the first goal in constantly throughout the game, even now. And I'm just playing for fun. So, I mean, it's just it's a lot of trying to keep your head in the game. I am ADHD a little bit, PTSD and post concussion syndrome. So it's for me to focus is it's a fight. So sometimes I would drift out of focus during games as a kid. And even when I was playing for the Devils, sometimes I would drift away when we were pumping a team, like it's really something I had to work with my whole career and not realize till now that I had these other things I was dealing with, right?
Were you a goalie who guys could talk to in the intermission?
Oh, yeah.
Did you just want to be left alone?
I was very shy within our team in Streatham because there's a lot of strong characters there. Like you had your Jim Johnston, Warren Rost, who were the main defensemen. We had Nicky Andoli and the Collinses, and that was their little group, right? It was like a tight-knit group, and to get in that group was not easy. And, I think I did a pretty good job of getting in that group and being made welcome by them. But that was, I think, just from performances, which gets you into a group like that. But they always had the best trainers. Like I remember when Reebok came out, I always followed the Collinses and the Andolis and Nicky, and to see what they were wearing, because then I would try and get the same, right?
Yeah.
Like the first pair of Reebok Classics, when Reebok first.
Yeah. And I can't wait till they start talking about the first pair of who got the first pair of Patrick Cox shoes when they started playing it this season.
And he was Canadian.
Yeah. So listen, let's start the second period because, and I want to come from like that drive that you had as a youngster, and I'm glad you mentioned the old Saskatoon barn because that's where I really fell in love watching the Blades in the '80s and the Cooperalls, and the hockey players that I saw growing up were just the Wendell Clarks, like they're just unbelievable hockey players, and that's where I fell in love with the game because especially in that old barn, the thuds of the pucks on the boards was very unique. It was just a great place to fall in love with hockey. So you had this drive and determination where, hockey took number one, and then you go and you impress the folks at Medway and you end up over in Medway playing senior hockey. And that was the start of it for you. So, what was that like? What was it like knowing that you were going to be, playing at that level of hockey with that caliber players? I know you were a younger guy and stuff, but how did you feel knowing that you were getting that much closer to, I don't know if it was a dream for you. I know the NHL was, but playing the highest level hockey that you could play.
Well, I mean, and one little bit I missed out there was when I was playing at Streatham, we lived in Epsom, so it wasn't that far away. But then we moved to Kent, just outside Maidstone, which was an hour commute. So that was another one of the reasons. Like I had practiced with Medway just because it was close. And it was for extra ice time. Like I would go out with them and skate with them late at night because that's the only time anyone ever practiced. And, it's the only time you could get ice. And I would still train at Streatham with the juniors, right? And I would get changed in the car in the back seat, full goalie gear on the way to the rink, right? And then when we moved to Kent and they wanted me to sign for them as a kid, as a 14-year-old kid, it was definitely more inviting because of the commute, right? So I ended up moving there and playing with actually Russ Jackson, who had just started playing hockey. Like he made an unbelievable progression in his career from someone that hadn't played as a kid. And then I think we had Kevin McNaught there, Ross Lambert, who was unbelievable to have on your team, but you did not want to play against him, and I played many years against him. And Dale Lambert, his brother. And Gore Jeffrey too. So yeah, we had a pretty good Canadian core group there, and we competed. And I probably split the duties with another goalie, Bob Matura. I don't know if you remember that name. And then ended up playing more games than not. So that was where I realized that there was a progression there, and I had coaches approaching me from other teams wanting me to come play. And I remember playing a game against Peterborough, right? And Peterborough had Gary Unger playing for them. and they were just killing everyone at the time, right? They were in a league they shouldn't have been in, because we were in Div 1 in the Premier Division, which is now the Elite League, was where they were going. So they were pumping everyone, and I think, typical English score, they beat us 10-9, but we were up, I think we were up like 8-2, and I was playing unbelievable, right, as a 14, 15-year-old. And Gary Unger then decided to light it up, and that was where Gary Unger saw me, and I ended up communicating with Gary Unger, and he wanted to bring me to Peterborough in the Premier Division. And I was like, Peterborough, that's kind of a weird move. And then he dangled the carrot at me, which was, you can go and I can get you working at the Okanagan Hockey School in Penticton. And that's where my link to Penticton came in British Columbia. So I ended up, taking him up on the offer, and I was on the YTS scheme. I was making a huge 23 or 24 pounds a week, right? And I was supposed to go to university. I went one day and never went back to university, right? So I ended up going over to, am I digressing here, or is this okay?
No, go for it, yeah.
I ended up going to Canada, working at the hockey school there as a counselor, living in a dorm. I met my ex-wife that year there, right? I think I was just turning 16. Ended up having the summer there, and then coming back to Peterborough for the first year in the Premier Division. And I was there with another goalie, Chris Newton. And Chris was very hot and cold. When he was hot, he was hot. But, he had a lot of rough games, and I ended up getting quite a few games in Peterborough. But that was a very difficult period in my life, actually. My parents were going through a divorce. It was a very messy divorce. It was right before I went to Canada. I had a fist fight with and I was not aggressive at all. I had a fist fight with my mom's boyfriend. It was super, it was just a very aggressive, ugly time in my life for sure. And that got sorted. The divorce went through. I was stayed with my dad. My brother was whisked away. He had to quit hockey. He went to stay with my mum in Devon. Never spoke to my mum for quite a few years after that. Obviously, everything's fine with her now. And then I went to Canada. And then when I came back, I went straight up to Peterborough. So I'd finished school, obviously. Went up to Peterborough.
You're 18, 19, right? 18, 19 years old?
I'm probably 16, 17.
Okay.
Right. So I went up to Peterborough, and I was billeted with this old gay couple. No issues there with that, but it was a very, I think I was kind of abused up there, not sexually in any way, but if I wasn't back at the time they said, they'd wait for me to come home, and they'd dump my food in the garbage in front of me. Everything was locked. The only two rooms I used was the bedroom and the bathroom. I wasn't allowed any other rooms. I woke up one night, and he was standing over me. And I mean, I'm just a kid. I mean, nowadays, if that happened, I'd jump up and probably, punch the guy. But it was a lot of stuff that you shouldn't be doing to a 16-year-old. Like, I wasn't allowed to use the phone. I wasn't allowed to call my dad. I ended up not eating there anymore. I would get up at 5 a.m, walk the streets of Peterborough until practice, and then walk the streets again. I'd go sleep in the movie theater. Elwyn Dawkins, actually, I don't know if you know that name. He was in Peterborough, and he would take me to the movies, and we watched movies all day. And that was kind of my only out I had from that life. They always made food what they knew I didn't like. So I didn't eat there. I didn't do anything. I never unpacked my bag for 3 months. I had my bag on the floor, and it was always packed. I would only sleep there probably between 2 and 6 every day. Sometimes I'd sleep in the dressing room, obviously, because I was exhausted. It was a very tough time. And then you kind of put the divorce on there for a 16-year-old, what you've had to deal with that. And I never really dealt with it ever. And I just kind of tucked it away. I mean, there's lots more other stuff, but you know, we only have an hour and a half. But I would, you know, go to practice, and I just wasn't myself at all. I was dealing with, you know, no sleep, sleeping in the dressing room, on the floor, and then trying to play hockey. And then finally, Jason Porter was on my team, JP, and he asked his parents if I could move in with them, and that saved me. That was, I was going to quit hockey. I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. And that saved me. And I had the most unbelievable time with the Porters. What an amazing family. Like, one of the best, like Peggy and Ed, they looked after me like their own. It was so nice. And I hung out with Jay and Cassie Dawkins all the time. We had such a good time. And then I would see this, I remember I'd be up there in, because he billeted other people, I think. They were like crazy Pirates fans. This couple I was with originally, and they had their car painted the colors. Their whole house was painted the colors, and you would think that would be a nice place to put someone, because at the end of the day, it's you know, they're hockey fans. They're going to do the best for the team. But no, it was not, and no kid should have today. No kid would have gone there. There's no way.
No.
Right.
Basically, like, thank you for like sharing this with. I know it's not easy, you know, and I know you started off almost trying to defend it, saying, you know, it wasn't sexual abuse or anything like that. But I mean, any way you look at this is abuse, you know, and this is things that a 16-year-old should not have to go through. And you know, you sharing it right now, man. I could tell it's not an easy thing to do, you know, especially because we're men and we grow up and we're strong and But whatever age you are, you know, listening to that story, it really, man, it hurts the heart. Can't even imagine, like, you just walking the streets of Peterborough just because you're scared to go home and be abused, you know, in a psychological way, but having like some guy standing over you when you're sleeping. I mean, you should be feeling safe and nurtured so that you can perform at your best ability on the ice, and you weren't being looked after. So, thank you for sharing that. It's something that I think still, you know, we've heard of the guys, you know, the whole high profile stories that have happened in the NHL. And, you know, I'm thankful that guys have come through, and like the Sheldon Kennedy and Theo Fleury talking about their stories. But, you know, I know it's hard for you, but like, these stories do need to be told. And people need to listen, because it could be I know I'm working with a kid right now who's staying with billets in Boston, and like their parents, they trust the fact that they're staying somewhere safe, you know. So please, parents, make sure, no matter what, you know, your kids are being nurtured in a safe environment so that you don't have to go through what you went through. And thank God for the Porters. I wouldn't say they you know, rescued, because but they did.
They did. I love those guys. I have such a fond, you know, heart for that whole family.
Yeah. Well, so do we, for saving you, and it's yeah. I just can't even imagine, buddy. But you know, thanks for letting people know that things like that happen, and we have to be careful and cautious today to make sure that they still don't happen. I know that wasn't easy, dude. But thanks for sharing it. And let's try to move on. The fact that, you know, you got into a safe place, and where a guy Woody can now start performing at the level that he can, and how did that launch you into keeping your career going, and how did you end up with, like, it's so funny that there's like, we've got, you know Jeff Smith's coming on too tomorrow. We're recording.
I go after Jeff. Jeff's life story is unbelievable. Like, I go after Jeff, they're going to be like, that's the only one they're going to listen to.
But I haven't had a goalie on yet. All of a sudden I get two, and they're both Cardiff Devil dudes, you know. So how did you end up in Cardiff, and what was it like playing there? And
okay, so I had,
you know, that's where I got exposed to you as a great goalie. So,
well, I had the year in Peterborough, and it went pretty good. And then my dad, you know, had enough in the UK. I'm kind of going back a little bit here to get to Cardiff, right? So then my dad had decided he'd had enough, and he basically ran from the tax man after selling the family business, and moved to North America. His plan was to basically travel North America and he got to Canada, and he's in Penticton, and he says, you should come live here. So I went out there, and I didn't have any hockey. There was nowhere for me to play hockey. I mean, the Canadians were to get in the system was just too difficult for me. I was a foreigner. So I didn't play hockey for, quite a while. And I was there for 6 months. I went to high school in Canada for, a little while. Then I ended up coming back, and I stayed with my mum. And I was not playing hockey at all. So I ended up skating with, calling John Lawless in Cardiff. And I was probably 17, 18, I can't remember. Calling John Lawless and saying, I'm living in Torquay, which I didn't like at all. Can I come skate with you guys? Practice. And he's like, sure. So I went up there, and at the time they had Chris Newton as their backup and Jeff Smith, right? So Chris Newton was in Peterborough. And then so I went up there and practice, and John Lawless saw me play, and I hadn't played in 6 months, and he says, oh, we want to sign you, right? And I'm like, oh, wow. So I wasn't working. Actually, I was working as a dishwasher in a hotel at the time down there, and for the post office. So it was just I was not really in hockey, but I wanted to get back into it. So my mum and husband at the time would drive me up there, and I'd practice, and then we'd drive back. So then I signed for Cardiff, and I think it was £100 a week, right? Which, I could make go places, because I didn't really have a lot of expenses, because they put me up in the Marriott, right? So I lived in the Marriott for a year, and they gave me a British Rail pass. I could use it anywhere in Britain, free. So I would, I'd go to London and stuff on it. So yeah, so I ended up coming up to Cardiff, and Jeff was there, so it was very familiar. Me and Jeff had great history together, and ended up working with Jeff, and I'd get the odd game here and there. At the time, Jeff was playing for GB, and my first year was the year we won Wembley in 1990, and Jeff had saved the penalty shot, so it was just and that was my first year. I had huge hair back then, down to here. It was just ridiculous, right? And then so then from there, I started getting a few more games the next year, and then towards the end of the season, I started playing a lot more games. And I started progressing from there. And then in between, I played in Europe with Great Britain, played in some obscure places. I played in '87. I played in Romania when it was communist. That was an experience. But then I played in France and the Spanish Alps. We play with the World Juniors, and yeah. So my game was coming back, and I was enjoying playing in Cardiff. It was such a big deal back then. We were packed houses every game. It was so noisy in the building. The money, we were sponsored by, I think, Current Oil at the time, and then Swalic. So there was no problem. You didn't have to worry about not getting equipment or nothing like that, like you did with other teams. Because back in Streatham, Medway, even Peterborough, you couldn't get sticks. It was tough to get equipment. It was just not easy. So when I went to Canada, I'd bring stuff back for myself, and the team would pay me for it. So yeah, so I was in Cardiff, and skating more, playing more. I think in 91, I ended up playing the playoffs instead of Jeff. And the next year, Jeff moved to Swindon, I believe. And yeah, so and then I was the starter at I think must be 1920. I was a starting goalie. And I'd gone back to Canada for the summer to train, and I think I'd already had a few practices with the GB senior team, and I'd gone back to Canada. I worked my nuts off. I was in really good shape when I came back, and I remember flying back into Cardiff, and I was the starting goalie, and we were playing in the Sheffield tournament, and I flew back and played the final, and we won 3-1, I think, and that was my first kind of I'm the starter, I'm the guy, and I ended up playing every single game that they could throw at me, charity games, GB games, every playoff game. And I think it was the year we did the triple or the double. I can't remember. And that team we had was unreal. The characters on that team, like I think you did a podcast with Shannon Hope. Like what a character, But it was the best day ever. There was us kids. There was me, Nicky Chin, and Jason Stone were the kids on the team at the time. And they were just starting out. Obviously, they started pretty late because Cardiff was quite a new rink, and they came on in leaps and bounds. Obviously, you can see the illustrious careers they both had. But yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable ride playing pro hockey in Cardiff. And obviously, my contracts got better than £100 a week. But everyone wanted to play in Cardiff at the time. John Lawless really knew how to manage and handle his players. And it showed. It showed in the results. He brought in the right players. He brought the Coopers in. The year we lost the Coopers, I mean, in those days, it wasn't bringing in the best imports like it is now. In those days, you had to bring in the best British players because there was only 3 imports and maybe a dual national. So it was all about getting the best British players, and I felt privileged to be, the goalie he wanted. And then he brought the Coopers in, and our first line was unbelievable. It was Steve Moria, Doug McEwen, and Ian Cooper. And then we had Shannon Hope and Stephen Cooper on D, and me. I'm like, this line is unreal. Like, so, yeah. And then our second line was pretty strong too. I mean, it was John Lawless, Wilkie, Brian Dixon, who's passed away, rest in peace. And then on D, Derek King, I believe, and John Bernicle. So, I mean, that's how far back we're going, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, we had a really top first line and a solid second line, and that was, you only really had 2 lines back then,
Yeah. And you actually made it into you did a season of the Ice Hockey Super League, and that's when I would have your last year in Cardiff was Super League, wasn't it?
It was the 90s. Probably my worst experience in hockey I've ever had.
Tell me about that.
So I've gone through all these years of being the top goalie in Cardiff. Actually, we should probably jump to Stevie Lyle before we go to that.
I was going to bring in Lyle. So yeah, bring in Lily.
Yeah, so Lily was a kid that I used to drive to school when he was 13, 14 after he practiced with us, probably 13. And he'd be like, don't drop me at school. Just tell him he took me. Tell him he took me. Don't drop me at school. He just wanted to be on the ice, right? And you could see he had an unbelievable talent, right? And then when we went to Tilburg to play in the Europa Cup, I took a shot in the eye, fractured my orbital up here, and Stevie was the backup. Stevie, actually, he played the first game, and it was more of a publicity thing, but he was lights out, and we ended up winning. He was absolute lights out at 14. I played the second game. Don't remember any of that day to this day. And he went in. Don't know how it ended. I think we lost. And then he played the next game. He was unreal. So then when we came back to Cardiff, I was still playing the majority of the games when we came back, but he was getting some here and there, right? And he was on my heels. Like it was me and Jeff Smith scenario. Now it was Stevie and me scenario, right? So Stevie, basically came up through the ranks. And then the year the Super League came out, Stevie got picked up by the Plymouth Whalers through, I think that was through Gary Steffen that had a part in that through his brother, who used to be an NHL goalie and was in that system. So Stevie went out there and, he was on a team with Robert Esch, who ended up playing for the Flyers. And I think he did good, but there was only a 3 import rule, I believe, in the OHL. Same thing as it was here, right? So if you weren't like unbelievable, like Russian or, Swede, coming in as a British goalie was very difficult. So that year was the Super League year. So I ended up, we went to Brest in France for training camp, and I brought Glenn Anderson over with me. I don't even remember. Yeah, you remember Glenn Anderson, right? Yeah. So I would skate every summer with Glenn Anderson in the Okanagan and a bunch of NHL guys. And I brought him over, and he was going to sign for Cardiff, right? But he didn't like David Temmie, who was the owner. And that was looking good. There was some good publicity out of it. He wanted to one part of the team, and it didn't end up working out. I had the best camp I'd ever had in Brest. I was playing top of my game. I was playing with Frank Caprice, who was an unbelievable mentor, played for the Canucks. Super guy. And they ended up playing real well. Then the season rolls around, right? I don't see the ice once, right? And nothing. I'm on the bench, don't see the ice at all. I'm practicing well, I'm playing well. Then Stevie now is coming home, fine. So he comes back to Cardiff and they sign him. So I'm like thinking, well, what's going to go on here? So in the summer before, I remember I'd set up, because the Super League was a new thing. It was going to be as close as they could to an NHL setup. I'd set David Temmie up with Brian Burke of the Canucks to try and figure out how to run and how to look after the players and all that kind of stuff. And he'd come over and he'd have dinner with my family, and he'd ended up meeting Brian Burke and taking some pointers and coming back to Cardiff. So I'm in Cardiff and Stevie's there, and now Stevie's dressing and I'm not even dressing, right? And now they are refusing to pay me because Stevie was getting paid half of what I was getting paid. So they figured they cut their losses, and the gamble worked out. I mean, Stevie was unbelievable, right? And then I end up, they're doing their best to try and work me out of the team. And David Temmie was a huge player in that. I don't blame any of the other, I don't blame Paul Heavey at all. I don't blame any of the other staff around it. They were just doing what they were told. So after all the years I put in there and the success we'd had, it really ended on a rough note. I ended up suing them. I used to go on practice and I would stand on the ice by the boards the whole practice. I wasn't allowed to go in the net, but I had to show up. I wasn't allowed to keep my equipment in the dressing room. I'd take it home. They took my sponsored car away. They stopped paying me. So that's when I sued them. They ended up loaning me to Stevenage for 2 games. And I went and played in that league, and I think, I played really well. It was 2 leagues down, I mean, it's a lot different. And then I ended up coming back to Cardiff and doing the same again. And then Frank Caprice got hurt. So then I ended up backing up Stevie, and I never got a look in there either, right? And when I did finally, Stevie had a run of games where he played a lot, and he said he didn't feel good. And this is like, honestly, we've had the warm-up, we're in the dressing room, we're just about to go out on the ice. And I've got no confidence whatsoever. I haven't played a game all year, right? I haven't even practiced. I haven't faced a shot in practice all year. I've basically been told to stand there. And now I'm starting against Bracknell. And I go in and I'm shit, right? And I get yanked. I'm on for a period. And then Stevie goes back in. And that was it. That was the end of my Cardiff career, basically, because then Frank Caprice came back and I was just hanging around. I was like a bad rash, but I had to live up to my side of the contract, even though they weren't living up to their side of the contract. I wasn't, when the season ended, I wasn't allowed in the rink. David Temmie wouldn't allow me in the rink at all. I wasn't allowed to see any of my buddies. I wasn't allowed anywhere near the Cardiff Devils. So that was when what did I do then? Went to Canada for the summer, came back, and I ended up applying to be a fireman in South Wales Fire Service. And in between waiting for that to happen, I got called up and I went and played for Humberside. Played pretty well. And also I won the case too. But I mean, it was just going from such an amazing time and a winning time with a team like that. I don't mind being beaten out by Stevie. I've got no problem with that. Like, Stevie was, unreal. It was the way they did it, Yeah. They forced me out. They concocted that I was trying to steal stuff out the changing room and selling it to kids. Like, it was just made up stuff off of it just to try and make it look like they could fire me. And that was my last year in Cardiff, going from, the starter playing with GB to your career's over.
I know a lot of people talk about, and I do. I talk about the Super League as being, the highest caliber of hockey that was played in the UK. But always I talk about, guys that I know that hung them up. I had some good friends that were good British solid hockey players. And just because of the repercussions of what the Super League did to British talent in terms of spaces to play, the treatment of them, guys just got fed up and they're like, I don't want this. I'm playing hockey because I love it and I don't want to fit into this way hockey is being run. So for whatever good it did in terms of the fact that it was on Sky and all this stuff, owners, management, the league hurt so many homegrown British players. And I think that it will tarnish the legacy of what that caliber of hockey did. I'm so, again, dude, I'm sorry that you had to go through that, because I like to ask guys what their, how they ended their career. And I know you and I both have really sad stories, because it didn't end with shirt retirements or testimonial games or handshakes and guards of honor.
I played. I gave everything for Cardiff when I was there. Like I played a year with a broken kneecap and no ACL. Like I played 82 games that year with national team and all kinds of stuff. But I just wanted the team to win. I was, it was so dialed in that respect. And I'd do it all again, to be honest. People say, would you do it again? I'm like, yeah, I would,
I hear you, buddy. I hear you. The love of the game, it's there. And we're going to end the second period. We're going to not have an intermission chat again. We're going to go straight into the third period, because I love the way how you started to think about, a career in life after hockey. I know, actually, the funny thing is, the other day you said you're maybe 5 or 6 years away from ending this round of a pro career in terms of firefighting. I can't believe it, man. You're not that old. But, you are about to, you're a fire chief in a fire department in British Columbia, and you've had this incredible life after the game, and it's been made from what I know about you is your determination, your hard work, your attention to detail. Whatever made you a great goalie is your character, and has made you, a great man today, and one who I'm really proud to call my friend and part of my tribe, and doing what we're doing. But fuck, we're learning a lot, and the fact that you came into our sessions, a couple of months ago talking about your concussions, and everyone just going like, what, and it was something you just were like, oh yeah, I've had that many concussions, and I'm dealing with all of these things now. And I look at your life on the outside, and the cycling, and your daughter's graduating, and you're always looking great. We bumped into each other in Toronto 9 years ago. I was not in a good way, but you were like looking slim and well dressed, and you had a pretty girl on your arm, and you were just busy at life. And I needed to see you then, because I needed to know that I had something. I needed to change my lifestyle, so let's get into it, man. You think, okay, I'm going to be a firefighter. Let's start there, and how you ended up where you are today.
Okay, so I ended up doing the recruits program in Cardiff, and it was in Barry, actually, for South Wales Fire Service. And it was it was basically like a military training camp. You went from 5 a.m. till, by the time you'd ironed all your parade gear and done studying and stuff, till 1 a.m. every day. And some days they'd wake you up in the morning and just ruin your 4 hours sleep or whatever you're getting, right? Like it was hideous. It was live-in. You lived on barracks. And you just got shit kicked for 3 months. But looking back at it, best thing I ever did. Being able to get through it. I mean, the number of times you call yourself a pro athlete, they shout at me, they scream in my ear, like everything you see on the, on the TV, on
Scared
YouTube.
straight and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they just try and mean, I strongly believe it works. I mean, I'm a lot calmer at fires now than I see other people being. But yeah, so I did that, and I went into the South Wales Fire Service. I started in Whitchurch, was my first posting. Loved it. Knew I was leaving though. I knew I was leaving from day one. My ex-wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I had planned to move out there and try and get a job in the same profession. And the reason I went for that profession was it was the closest I could find in a job as in the hockey dressing room. You know, they're very similar jobs, you know, they're very similar kind of environment. Like I wouldn't last 5 minutes in an office. So I would offend so many people. I don't have a filter, right? So I would end up, you know, I ended up doing that. And in the meantime, my only real hockey, this is interesting actually, I helped coach the Cardiff second team. Tammy had moved on, so I was now allowed back in the rink. And I was coaching, and Jonathan Phillips was playing for him. And I remember playing in Romford, and we were down 1 goal, and he was last shift of the game. I goes, make something happen, and he got the puck, went down the ice, scored a breakaway, and tied her up. And I just remember that really well because I always say to him, you know, remember that time? And he's like, yeah. It was just, and then look at his career, like what an amazing career. But yeah, that was my involvement in hockey. My brother was actually moved to Cardiff then too. So I was renting my house out because obviously I couldn't afford that anymore because I wasn't playing hockey, and I was living with my brother. And yeah, he was playing inline hockey, and he actually played for the national team. He was a goalie, Dan, unbelievable inline goalie. And I would play hockey with those guys too and help them out. And, you know, that was fun. And then, so after about a year and a half probably a year and a bit with South Wales Fire Service, I was playing football, back playing football again. And I broke my tib fib, went knee on shin with someone. And so that was quite the recovery there too, right? So I ended up recovering from that, did a few more months, with the fire service when I came back, and then handed in my resignation, which was tough to do when I was going over to Canada with no job. So then I moved to Canada, I got married, and I applied for the fire service in Penticton, which is 4 hours east of Vancouver. And I ended up being a volunteer with the fire service there. They had paid jobs, but they were very hard to get, very, very hard. And bartended. And I played on a beer league hockey team. So I kept played in the beer league hockey team, and I was bartending. I remember I came back, here's a kind of an interesting bit here. I came back and I've been playing beer league, and I came back for a couple of weeks to Cardiff to see my brother, see family, what have you. And I brought my gear with me. And my idea was I want to get a couple of practices with the Devils. So I go down the rink, and they're still in the old barn, and I end up skating with them. And I've been playing, you know, I mean, yeah, I'm not, like, my body's not in the kind of shape it used to be. But for the first week, I couldn't even see the puck. It was in and out the net before I could even see it. And I'd been playing beer league. After a week, I could see the puck again. Like it was such a jump. But I ended up going to Nottingham. I can't remember what the game was, and they signed me on a temporary contract because I think Stevie got hurt or someone got hurt, and they put me in at Nottingham, and I went and I did okay. Like it was like, so yeah, so there was that. But then so then my career, I got married. I had a daughter, Taylor. She's now 21, and she has graduated UBC and is now working in the she got psychology major, so she's working in that line of work now. And then after Taylor was born, she was about 1 year old. I ended up having to redo all my fire qualifications because they wouldn't recognize anything here. So I moved to Edmonton for 3 months, and that was an experience, I tell you. Moved up there and ended up doing everything all over, and the training was absolutely terrible compared to what I had done in the UK. Got my qualifications, and now I was 4 years a volunteer. I put another application in. I probably applied 15 different places, done about 10 interviews. I'd got hired in Seattle, but I couldn't get a work visa. Like I was trying hard. I'd applied for Calgary. I'd done everything in BC. Like I was just everywhere I could to try and get in. And I ended up getting hired in Delta. And that's where I have been for 20 years now. Um, then after about a year in Delta, Jada was born, my youngest, who's just graduated high school and is now moving to Vancouver to go to SFU to do environmentals. Like it's crazy how quick it goes. I used to commute for 18 years. I'd spend 4 days down here at work and then 4 days back in Penticton, which was a 4-hour drive. And I did that for 18 years. I wanted to be a huge part of my kid's life. And that was what was important to me then. And in the meantime, I'd come down here, I'd work, I'd play hockey down here, I'd play beer league in Penticton when I could, just pick up games wherever I could. And yeah, now 20 years on now.
How did you fit it all in? How did you fit it all in? Because, like this, like I hear you say 18 years of doing this and 4 hours driving there, and then the daughters and wanting to show up and be a good dad, playing the hockey on this, like, how did you fit it all in? Where is the time to go, I'm just going to have some Jason time, I'm going to relax, or you just, to me, it's tiring listening to you. Like you're always on the run. And again, when I see you doing stuff, you're cycling or you're doing like, it just seems you had so much on, man. When did you find time for yourself?
Very rarely. I didn't really have any time for me. Like I would drive down to Vancouver the night before my shift, get down here, and actually when I first moved down here, I slept in my car for the first couple of years because I couldn't afford to find a place to live. So I was like, in between day shifts, I'd be in my car, I'd park somewhere and just go to sleep, and then wake up in the morning, go to the hall, shower, and start my shift, right? So I did that for a couple of years, but I'd come off night shift. So I do 2 days, 2 10-hour shifts, right? So I'd have 3 nights in my car, unless I could pick up a night shift somewhere and work for someone. And then I'd do 2 night shifts, right? So then I'd have the day to kill. So I'd drive around like an idiot. I'd go down the States, wherever, just to kill the day. Because, I didn't have much money because I was on probationary money. So then I would, after my last night shift, regardless of how little sleep I got, I'd drive back to the Okanagan to Penticton and, to be with my kids. At this time, probably maybe 3 years in to the job, we ended up separating, me and my ex. We'd been together 10 years and then 10 years married. And yeah, I mean, it's super tough, the lifestyle I had, because I wasn't around. Actually, I was probably around more than most dads who work full time, but it's super tough. And no matter what either party does, it's always 50-50. There's always a reason why stuff is done. And no matter how innocent you think you are at the time, me not being around played a part in it. So I just took me a while to figure that out. Now me and my ex-wife, we get on fine. There's no issues. I want her to do well. She wants me to do well. And then I was stuck doing the commute. There was no way the family was moving down. So I did it for 18 years, back and forth. Played a few fun tournaments though. I played for the fire department now. I played in Quebec City, which was cool. I played in Vancouver. That was real high level. There was a couple of players there that you might have heard of. The Ference brothers were playing for Calgary Fire.
Okay. I don't know.
No, they played for Calgary Flames. And then Joaquin Gage, who was the Oilers goalie. He was playing like that. It was really good hockey, and I was in pretty good shape, because for some reason after getting separated, I lost all the weight. I was up to 245. Misery eating, snacking on the drives, like that kind of stuff, right? So I lost like 20 pounds in 2 weeks from not eating anything, nothing. I just had no appetite. And then just went on a fitness run from there. But yeah, and then I also played in Australia, in Adelaide, and that was an experience too. So I mean, so now I've got I'm in my 21st year with the fire service. Had some great times. Basically, it's a hockey dressing room within reason. You do get a few people that haven't played sports that don't quite get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to know your audience.
From some of your stories, I get it. I know.
Yeah, you got to know your audience, right?
Woody, like, from our talks over the last few months, like we've talked to guys who, like, and me, like when my last game was in like 90, 98, 99, or I don't know. I don't even remember the year, but I literally,
Sheffield was your last game when we played you in
well,
Sheffield.
yeah, I was going to talk about that because like I mentioned it the other day when we were talking about it and how you stymied me in my last chance to score a goal in the Sheffield Arena. And you
Sorry,
robbed
mate.
me, man. You robbed me. But I don't know if you were doing it on purpose because it was me and you just didn't like me. But you did throw a lot into that save, dude. Like you could have let it go in. You could have let it go in. Like
Well,
it's
that's
come on.
obviously the turning point in your life right there, right? You know, it
But
was
that
like,
game for me, that was the first time I'd stepped on the ice in 13 years. Like it was
yeah.
like the first time I'd stepped on the ice. I had not been on the ice. I was so wobbly. Everything was gone. And we've talked to a lot of guys, even Paul Rushforth, who was on the other day. He said when he retired from London, he went back to Canada. He put his equipment down by the garbage, and he hasn't been on the ice since. How important was it for you, to stay involved in hockey over, that period?
Well, I mean,
Over the last 20 years.
it's my identity. It's the reason I found Canada, and it's the reason I'm here. I mean, Gary Unger is basically, and I've told Gary this before, and I've spoken to him. He's the reason I ended up here, you know, because he gave me that contact. I met my ex-wife, and that's the reason why I ended up here. And it's why I joined the fire service. You know, because of that team dressing room environment. I still love to play. I still like to go out there and prove. Like I'm playing right now. I'm 52 years old. I'm playing with 20-year-olds who are just out of junior. I'm playing with, guys that have played pro and in a similar boat to me. Like it's decent hockey, and I'm still competing. It's not like I'm getting ripped apart. Like I'm keeping games close and enjoying it still because I like the competition. I like, like if you told me here's I don't know, you're going to go horse riding. I'm not going to do it because I want to do stuff that I can do. I want to be good at stuff. I don't like doing stuff I'm not good at, if you know what I mean.
I get it. I get it. I want to be able to show up too. I don't want to fall off and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but we also know, that you've had some challenges with regards to some dings to your head. How have you been able to cope with that, with post concussion syndrome? Um, are you still do you get scared about playing? Do you get scared about getting hit in the head? What's the story
Everyone,
been like for you dealing with that?
I think everyone around me, like I'm actually getting married in August 18th. My new fiance, Claire, she's English, so we have the same kind of banter. She's great. She doesn't like me playing. And then every now and then I'll throw in a football tournament, fire department football tournament, which even just diving and landing gives me concussion symptoms, right? So she's not a fan of that, and I get it, but she doesn't understand that I'm male. So I'm not going to listen. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, I keep playing hockey. I take the odd ding in the head, it shakes me up, messes up my day for the next couple of days. But I just, the balance to me is it's worth the risk. I mean, I'm more likely to get hurt in football, which I did last year. I ended up getting a broken nose and another concussion. So it's just who I am. I like to compete. I don't like to go out on the ice and play against guys that can't score on me. Do you know what I mean? I want to go out there and challenge myself. And when I can't do that anymore, then I won't play anymore.
Do you think that is the nature of a lot of hockey players, is that they want to compete? But we now live in a world where we know, getting hit in the head isn't good. Do you wish that maybe you had some people around you when you were younger that would have
Oh,
looked at?
100%. Like they could recognize, after you take a good ding in the head, because back then we wore helmets. So when you got hit in the head, it hurt right where you got hit in the head. Like, you get the screws cut your head up here. They go through and cut you open. And right where you'd have a welt where it hit you, because there was not like a goalie mask. I don't know where I've been hit in the head when I get hit with a mask on, because it's all over, right? But yeah, I mean, if I was playing in a league or professionally of any kind, I probably wouldn't be allowed to play. But I want to keep playing. I enjoy it. I think I've figured out how to manage this. Like I don't get a lot of help anymore. I just try and manage it. I've tried a lot of things. Like I'll give you an example. If I'm to sit at a dinner table with a bunch of people, and if I'm sitting in the middle of the table and not at the end, I have concussion symptoms by the end of the night from turning my head back and forth talking to everyone. So I have to really recognize, when I'm out and when I'm doing stuff, that's a problem, and I have to address it before it happens. So,
what other things are you looking at, knowing that we're all learning a little bit more about the healing process, and about maybe the onset of things like CTE if it gets that serious? Are you going to start exploring, maybe instead of just coping with it, but actually trying to heal from it?
well, I'd like to find the miracle cure, right? Not to have to deal with it. And I'm sure any other player that is dealing with it would be the same. I mean, the miracle cure would have been having somebody when I was a kid that was out there recognizing what was happening.
So, when do you think you got your first concussion?
When I was a kid wearing a helmet, I remember taking a shot in the head.
13, 14?
Yeah. And then since I fractured my orbital, it's very easy to get concussion. Like I got Frank Bruno's jaw, right?
Ding.
Yeah. So
what do you think it is about, though, how that you just keep going, you keep on going, and you actually said the benefits of what you're doing outweigh the risk? You're playing with, your fiance knows that this is dangerous. You're playing with fire. What on earth, Woody, is in you, and also in, I think, the nature of hockey players that just wants to keep on going?
I think that drive is installed in you at a young age to try and, compete and get on these teams and make these teams. And it comes from coaching and being pointed in the right direction. Nothing was handed to you back then. It was all, you had to work for it. Whereas now there's academies where basically the rich make the NHL, it seems. Do you know what I mean? Like you're not going through academy, then you're probably not going to get a very good shot at your draft here, right? So it's just, I've just been someone that's been really driven. I've watched my dad, work like crazy when he was alive, to try and find out ways to get stuff he wanted to do. And, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's installed in me. My brother's the same. He's got drive to compete. He did a race a couple of years ago. It's called the Dragonback race. And he ran, I think it's 380 kilometers over 5 days, climbing 19,000 meters. And he trained for that. So, it's just drive. If I know I love to ride my bike and I ride it all the time. People say, why don't you enter races? And I'm like, I do it for the exercise. It helps with my concussion. It gets the adrenaline going. It makes me feel good. I'm not going to go in a race. I'm scared to come off the bike, hit my head, so I steer away from it. But at the end of the day, I don't have the power to race. I have the endurance to ride for a long time. I just don't have the power to keep up with anyone. So I don't do it for those reasons.
Yeah. Woody, that's the end of the third period, buddy. Thanks for telling your story.
Thanks for having me.
I've got to throw to an overtime period, though, because a couple of things you said. I wanted to bring in, the transition with Lily, how you met Stevie Lyle. And I skipped by that because I just wanted to get into the Super League, because that's when I remember, being at Sky Sports and being down in those tunnels at Cardiff. And, that's what I would have run into you and stuff. And as soon as I said Super League, you were like, you almost looked angry.
Yeah, I don't think it was a painful year for me, to be honest. And I'll never forgive some people, that's for sure.
And I'm wondering, we're in overtime now, by the way. So the Zamboni's going to go by. Ben's going to have to do the edit.
Is it 3-on-3 overtime or 5-on-5?
It's 3-on-3, buddy. 3-on-3.
Okay.
And then you said there's nothing that you would change. But I can't help but think, because your determination, your motivation, your drive, I wish you could bottle it, sell it. I wish I could give it to my boys, because I know it's in you. You inspire me with it. But I can't help but think, that in you there's still some anger, and that need to keep playing, to proving. Do you think inside of you, as a 52, almost 53-year-old man, you never got to prove how good you were? And is there some thought of regret?
Guaranteed. I mean, there's 2 points in my career that come to mind. The one is breaking my kneecap, which put me back a long way, and then the Cardiff thing. The kneecap was my fault. The Cardiff thing I had no control over. It was a money thing, and it was so badly dealt with and unnecessary. And I wasn't the only player that was done to either. We had a couple of other players. There was a Stefan Ziesch that played for us from Germany. He got pushed out. It was just we weren't humans anymore. We were we were a product, and we were disposed of. And after you've done so much for a club, and you've helped the new owners to create what they have now, to be treated like that, that's in there, and it'll probably be in there for till I'm gone, because that was. But at the end of the day, maybe it was the push I need into a different career. I mean, you're not going to. Let's be fair. You're not like these guys play in the elite league. These Canadians that come over, and again, I think there needs to be better rules for that too. The Super League ruined the British development 100%. The Elite League, there's not many British players playing in that. They need to govern that better, to better our national team. If you look at our national team, a lot of them are aging out now. Like there's some young players coming in, but not as much as what's aging out. So it was definitely something that was, I wouldn't even say ahead of its time, the Super League. I would say it shouldn't have even been there. The league was progressing. We were a Pool B nation, like hockey, been to Pool A once. And it came along and buried so many guys' careers. I believe I could have played in it, no problem. Like I could have, split with Frank Caprice. I could have played. But when you ram somebody's confidence into the ground so deeply, I never faced a shot for like 3-4 months. Just stand on the ice, right? I just skate. That was it. And when that's what you're doing to the British players who've grown up here and this is their country, and it's not a good ending. So yeah, I definitely hold a grudge there. I mean, people say let it go, but it's not that easy when it's your own life, right? When you poured so much into what you enjoy,
I fucking hate it when people tell me to let it go. If I have a resentment, I want to hold on to it until I want to get rid of it. But I also know that getting rid of it is something that I got to do. The process of doing it is something I need to do for my own health. Because if I do carry this stuff around, it sits in my veins like poison. And for a guy like me, that's really dangerous. For a guy like you turn into, maybe you put your energy of resenting them into the life that you've had today. So it's maybe fueled you into, you're going to retire, dude. You're out in 6 years. You've got a whole new life ahead of you at a young age. You're healthy as fuck. I envy you in so many, I don't envy you. I look up to you in so many ways, and I admire what you've done and what you're doing. Mm. But knowing that, do you think that there is a process for closure? Is it something that you'd be interested in doing? Is it something that you think that you need to do?
Oh, I'm sure.
To lay that at rest.
I would say yes for everyone in that position. I mean, I put that a couple of things to closure. Actually, I broke up with my fiance through this not during the engagement, but before, and it made me look at myself and go get some help. And I ended up letting go of that 6 months in Peterborough, actually bringing that up, which I never thought was an issue, but I brought it up and aired it out, and I told Claire about it, when we were getting back together. And then I had, I always resented my mum for what had happened during the divorce, and I dealt with that too, right? Yeah. But the other stuff I haven't really dealt with the hockey side of it. But at the end of the day, I'm living in Canada, I'm still playing hockey, got a great job, got a great new fiance, beautiful kids. you know, I don't know what more do I want out of it.
Yeah. I think maybe it's a good question, because I can't answer it, and it's a good way to leave it. Is that we just don't know yet, and I think that's what's so cool, dude. Is that we get to be on this journey and this process of being able to, you know, be on this journey of being able to do, because we've all got these challenges. Every third period and overtime is talking about challenges and resolving them, and I can't thank, you know, you and the other guys who've been on to come on here, share your story, be vulnerable. It's courageous what you're doing, because it is going to help somebody. So Woody,
I mean,
you know, thanks for coming on.
One of the saddest things I see, you know, makes me sad, is when I see guys I've played hockey with, and they don't have any idea what they're going to do after hockey. And you see them on Facebook, and you see them, and it's like they've got nothing. They're just, you know, they haven't found anything. They haven't found their way. They've lost their way completely after hockey, and that's a big problem too. And it happens over here too. You go from, you know, being in the NHL or playing as low as I did in the elite league, or not the elite league, sorry, the Super League and Premier Division, and now you're not doing that anymore, and now you're thrown in the mixer with everyone else, thinking you're still up here because that's how you've been treated when you're a pro athlete. But now you're just down here with everyone else. So you're not getting a free car. You're not getting deals on this. You're not getting that free. You actually got to go out and work for what you get. And I see people that haven't set that up, and they're just going from job to job to job, just trying to figure themselves out. And there's no help for that, really. There's no help for the aftermath of finishing a sports career. There's a little bit, but there's not a lot what there should be, that's for sure. And it's not just the high leagues, it's the lower leagues too. Like guys jump around the AHL, you know, their whole careers, and now they're done, and they all they've made is enough money just to live each day, not to create anything.
Well, hopefully that's what we're creating, right? Is a support network to be able to guide people through that journey. Because everybody's story is different, but when you hang them up, you never know, and you never know how it's going to affect you. And however you prepare for it, it's probably never enough preparation. Something's going to come out of somewhere and go, didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Woody, again, man, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everything you do. Thanks for speaking so honestly and courageously today, bud. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate it too. Appreciate having you in my life.
Beautiful. Me too, man. I love the journey. Thanks everybody for joining us. Don't forget to stay tuned for more episodes of Retribe Stick Together. Thanks, Woody. Thanks, Ben. Take it easy, folks.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Nick.